What's good, everyone? My name's Zayas, and today I'm here to review The World Is Mine by Hideki Arai. This guy has award-winning works, he has works with movie adaptations, and most of his works are untranslated, unfortunately. Even his wife's works, for the most part, are mostly untranslated. The two works he does have out, however, are very, very good. Both Kiichis and The World Is Mine have been quoted by Tatsuki Fujimoto, author of Chainsaw Man, as part of the inspiration for Fire Punch. Kiichis only finished translating this year, and surprisingly I actually found it to be better than The World Is Mine. But Kiichis Versus, on the other hand, has kind of had a slow start, so I'll see where that one goes. The World Is Mine is this crazy, suspenseful thriller series where you're constantly on the edge of your seat. The story does take a while to really come together because there's so many different characters and components to the stories that have to be worked in. There is also this fragmented storytelling method where we start kind of in the middle of the story and really have to piece things together, and we only really realize what happened at the end of the series. And I think this is good for rereads in particular, and it's good more so through the middle of the story because you can finally get a hang of what's happening. But I think at the beginning, like 20 to 30 chapters, it does kind of hurt the story a bit because there's so many things that are just unexplained and unanswered. When everything does come together in the story, though, it's well worth the wait. The characters are interesting, the story's multifaceted, it's fast-paced, there's tons of action, it's a great story. There is also some pacing issues here and there. There's some characters which feel important but really don't get enough time in the limelight for their full character arc, and there's tons of events which kind of just get skipped over a little bit, and I do think this fast pacing does hurt the story a little bit. I'd say the best part about the story is the relationships these characters have with each other and the anticipation of knowing that these characters will eventually at some point run into each other. There's characters like Toshimon and the Hunter, Toshimon and the police, the Hunter and the giant bear. It just feels inevitable that a lot of these characters will run into each other and some big event is going to spark. Characters are really the best part of this work by far. Each character has something interesting and unique about them. I won't talk about every single character because there's way too many, but what I will say just kind of as a group thing is that these guys are all super exaggerated and over the top. There's this incredibly stoic Hunter who used to be in the army. There's very strong personalities in the police force, all of which mostly contradict each other. And then there's characters like the journalist who likes to draw obscene things in his diary in his spare time. Just a ton of crazy over-the-top personalities. I'll mostly touch on Toshi and Mon because they are really the main characters of this work. Also, in a lot of series, you'll be actively rooting for the protagonist, and that's definitely not what happens in The World Is Mine, especially with characters like Toshimon, who are borderline just villains. And I kind of enjoyed it. It felt fresh, it felt different, and the execution was done pretty well. I really loved how complex and layered these characters were. A lot of the fun of the series is figuring out what drives these characters. Toshi is this once innocent Christian kid whose life dramatically changed after meeting with Mon. He's a character who always feels very insecure about how weak he is and how powerless he is, so once he sees a character like Mon, who does whatever he wants, is extremely powerful, is very primal, he really wants to be like him and aspires to become like Mon. This kind of backfires though, because after going on this crazy killing spree with Mon, basically doing whatever Mon wants, he doesn't really become anything like Mon. He does dramatically change though. He becomes colder, his appearance changes on the outside, he gets more and more used to killing people. Later on in the series, I really like how Toshi's eyes look because they look the same as they did near the start of the series. They're filled with fear, he's afraid of what he's done to these people, how much he's hurt these people, he's afraid of what's going to happen to him after the police catch him, and he knows he can't go back at this point. And the story with Toshi was really kind of crazy because at most he was only really like one or two good decisions away from all of this not happening. If he just hadn't followed Mon, if he just hadn't built those bombs, he probably would be living a normal, happy life right now. Mon, on the other hand, is the complete opposite. You can tell from the start of the work that this guy is a complete beast. He's basically like a caveman living in modern times. It's pretty much a marvel how he's managed to survive this long without being arrested. Mon has no ideas about the ways of the world. He doesn't really have any qualms about hurting anyone. He doesn't really consider murder and assault to necessarily be a negative thing, most likely because he hasn't experienced it himself, so he doesn't know what it's like to be hurt. He's extremely selfish as a character. He does whatever he wants, and in some ways, he's actually kind of the most free man on the earth because he isn't really constrained by any type of society or anything. Mon only really realizes his mortality after his run-in with Gumadon, after which he can't kill people anymore. The encounter with Maria changes that back, and I think Maria herself was a great character, and it was really kind of a tragic and sad ending that she got. In a lot of her story and several other characters' story, you're kind of sitting there feeling like, I hope this doesn't happen, I hope they don't get hurt, I hope everybody's okay, I hope nobody dies. And in the end of the story, they die, and you're like, I should have seen that coming. But I think the work they do to build that anticipation, to get you invested, to get you caring about these characters, is actually done pretty masterfully. I feel like I was very involved and invested and cared a lot, even though I kind of knew what was going to happen. I feel like the storyline between Tochi and Mon was done really well. These characters really were character foils, they were complete opposites. They created tons of great character moments together, and the morality and other topics brought up in their storyline were really done the best out of any other character. Some of the other characters also kind of carry some message, like maybe the politician about how corrupt and irresponsible the government is, and how much these guys will just put whoever they want in power and stuff like that. But I feel like these were a little harder to take seriously than Tochi and Mon, which kind of more so explain the concept of killing and why it's important to value human lives. But I feel like a lot of these other characters were so over exaggerated and so over the top, it was kind of hard to take them seriously at times. This goofy looking bear is somehow God, and Mon, this dude who can barely speak or communicate with others, is some sort of leader of a terrorist organization slash semi-prophet or something. And then this Japanese prime minister desperately wants to get naked in front of the entire world for some reason. On top of these parts of the story being a bit silly and a bit ridiculous, they also happen so fast to the point where there's not really enough explanation behind what's going on here. Like, obviously there's some deeper ideas within here that you can easily see, but it just all happens too fast to the point where it's not as good as the rest of the series. This is something I found to be much improved in Kiichis. They really only picked 2 or 3 core central themes and explored them very thoroughly, whereas here you have so many, like 6 or 7 different things that they're trying to explain, but none of them are really done that well except 1 or 2. I did like the art in this series. I feel like it does improve quite a bit after 50-ish chapters. Really, the main star of the series here are the character designs, the facial expressions. My favorite example of this is Toshi's mother. She comes into the series looking like a normal person, but after she gets news that her son has committed all these murders, she slowly gets more and more haggard and starts to look more crazy. She wasn't the only great transformation. Of course, Toshi himself had an incredible transformation from this innocent-looking young boy to mass murderer. And then there's characters like Maria, who went completely insane after seeing one of her closest friends die because of her. Even Mon had somewhat of a transformation after becoming more innocent somehow. Also, around the time when Hagumadon goes on the rampage in the city, the artwork gets really, really good. There's tons of crazy, impressive spreads with tons of action, explosions. There's breathtaking spreads of character shots in the latter half of the series. I really did like the artwork, especially towards the end. I didn't really like the backgrounds as much. Even though they had a ton of detail, I don't think it really enhanced the panels that much, especially when we're considering the shots that aren't spreads. In the spreads, the backgrounds were fine. Just in like the everyday panels, it kind of made you feel like boxed in and constrained, and it felt like there wasn't enough space in a lot of these panels. The artwork is very distinctly early 2000s, and it is a bit on the uglier side, but I think it suits the series quite well because are you really going to draw a pretty series about this guy who's a mass murderer? I don't think it would work. Also, there's a decent amount of gore, nudity, tons of intense scenes, so this really isn't for the faint of heart. When it comes to the ending, I actually didn't like the ending very much. I think the Toshi Mon arc concluded properly, with Mon kind of going back into the wilderness where he kind of belongs, and Toshi finally getting arrested getting kind of what he deserves. But when they go past that, there's a bunch of other things which I just feel like felt ridiculous and felt like out of place for the story. It just felt kind of silly to me. You go from the story about these two terrorists who are creating tons of destruction to talking about this giant bear who just is chilling in the ocean and is now the size of a continent, and the entire world's blowing up, and there's just all these crazy things happening that just really come out of nowhere. It just feels silly. Overall, I really like this work. It's almost like you're watching some type of crazy thriller action movie, and there's just tons of things happening. You're constantly anticipating things, tons of great characters. I really liked it, but it does have some flaws. I'm feeling like a light to decent 8. If you watched this far, thank you a lot. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, whatever. I was actually sick, so now I'm trying to work on these top 10 lists that I was going to do at the end of December, and now I'm getting really close, and hopefully I can get all 4 out, but if I don't, maybe I'll do some at the start of next month. But anyways, thank you. Comments for any suggestions, any manga you want me to review. I'll try to do some more very soon.